Normally, what we do is we give the guest kind of decision where do you want to start, but we're gonna change it up this week because I'm just gonna be selfish here. I'm the host, and I need to discuss House of the Dragon first. So we're gonna get onto that because it's been a huge, huge week. And before we do, we have to just recap everything that we went through and kind of help process the trauma that this show is putting us through because it really is starting to put us through the ringer in the way Game of Thrones did. And the only way we know how to do that on this show is with our alt recap, which we're going to do now. And Damon continues to have the holiday from hell in Harrenhal as he can barely sit through a meeting or get a good night's sleep on his Indian burial ground bed without seeing ghosts of his past, while literally a barn owl living in human form, which mocks him for being a shit husband as she feeds him probably poison. I thought getting robbed by a hooker in Vegas was bad, but you've got me beaten there, Damon. This is just a shit holiday. I'll get into that story another time, Jerry. Not that that ever was a good week to be a bastard or a woman in Westeros full of powerful horn dogs, but this is a particularly shit week. Rhaenys meets Alan, Corlys' secret bastard child, while Alicent can't even have an abortion in peace without the judging looks from the likes of Larys. Just be honest and tell them that it's Criston Cole's Alicent. Everyone will immediately understand, as that chap is a walking case for abortion himself. Aegon gets pissy he's being left out of the plots and schemes and asserts his authority by throwing a tantrum to his mummy, who mocks him as she had a fucking day of it herself. Rhaenyra returns to find Corlys, Rhaenys, Jace, and Baela struggling to manage her small dick, small council. She decides, with Kristen advancing on Rook's Rest, that it's time to send in the dragons, and I'm sure that's going to go great for her. We spoke last week of Kristen and Aemon's Subbuteo-style attempts to play fantasy football manager and saw them play out in real life in spectacular fashion this week. And how to describe that while keeping the metaphor? I don't know. I'll try put it this way. If this was a bunch of kids playing football with a crushed can of Coke in the schoolyard, just as one team seems to be ready to execute their tactical master plan and win, it's like Aegon came in and just like grabbed the ball. It was like, oh, oh, took a shot at the goal, except his brother, who was playing the match, tripped him up as he did. The can rebounded off the post, hit Aegon in the face, split his head open, and left him going to A&E. I didn't do it justice, but it's basically that with an epic dragon battle where Rhaenys died, Aegon may be dead, Kristen perhaps stopped Aemon putting the sword in his brother's throat as he lay dying, and the entire world of Westeros has been upended. And that was an epic Season 2, Episode 4, A House of the Dragon, The Red Dragon and the Gold. Jerry, you're coming to this very fresh. I haven't only watched this a few weeks ago. We're going to get into all the individual plot strands. There's a lot to get into. But first off, I just want to get a quick check-in on your episode thoughts and just high level. What are your thoughts on this episode?
So I loved season one, but I thought season one was a little kind of disjointed because of the time jumps, constantly jumping, 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 jumping. So we've kind of settled down now into season two, and the first couple of episodes have actually been really good, but they haven't been, I suppose, they haven't really been action packed. You've got a couple of things happening. This to me has been the best episode of House of Dragon to date. First season, second season, the whole lot. But to me, this episode is on par with some of the highest of highs in all of Game of Thrones,
Yes.
simply for the last 10 minutes. This was the plots and the intrigues in Game of Thrones and House of Dragons spectacular. But then when you see it in this, like even at the very start, we know what happens in this episode now because you've explained it in your alt recap. But even when you see Rhaenys at the very beginning of the episode, you have this very, very somber music. You know shit's about to go down. Because when they do this, when they have the focus on a single character and you have that kind of somber tone music, you know shit's that's going to happen, and really did. One thing I saw a meme today and I pissed myself laughing. So she goes to meet Alan in this episode. She meets Alan, and then she kind of not really confronts Corlys afterwards. It's kind of like, so I know who he is. You should bring him up. Give him the stature that he needs. So the meme I saw today was her saying this, and then Catelyn Stark saying to Jon Snow, "Get the fuck out." And I'm like, yeah, two very different type of people there. Two very different people. From start to finish, I couldn't stop watching. I couldn't stop. Like even when somebody came into the room, as I was playing, I was like, "Get out, get out! This is on. Fuck off." This was just out of everything that I've watched this week, out of everything that we've seen so far in House of Dragon, this was exceptional. If you haven't seen this episode, just go and watch it. Just go and watch it. This was the most spectacular thing to happen with dragons since either the attack on the gold train from I think season Loot Train,
7.
the attack on that, or Rhaegal's death.
Yeah,
is it Rhaegal? It is Rhaegal, isn't it?
Yeah.
Rhaegal. Since that, because that was, even that was 5 seconds long. That was the most spectacular thing to ever happen to a dragon because it just gets shredded by these fucking massive scorpions, and you're like, what? No, not Rhaegal, not poor Rhaegal. This episode, sweet Jesus, just
so good,
start to finish. Everything from it's Moon Tea, isn't it? That's what you got. Everything from Moon Tea to the little row, that the little kind of hissy fit that Jace takes, to the hissy fit of Aegon, and you knew something was going to bad happen to him when he's getting him in his heart. He goes, I'm fine. This is fine. I'm okay. And obviously, we got to see his dragon for the first time properly, and it's a beautiful dragon, but a fucking idiot.
Yeah,
it clearly not
an idiot dragon rider.
Yeah, it clearly not a battle hardened dragon, because bloody Jesus, the poor fucker really did. I found everything to do with Aemon in this episode very interesting. Very, very interesting. It's certainly leading to something, I think. Not necessarily something that I know, because it does seem to be deviating ever so slightly from the books, and that's not a spoiler there or anything, because we don't really know what's going to happen. But it's very, very interesting. Nice to see Criston Cole smack his head off the ground because he's a prick. It just everything in this, everything is just. We're really now. If they keep going on this trajectory, this season it's probably going to surpass Game of Thrones in terms of quality, in terms of highs, in terms of everything that we just love about this type of series. It is on par with nearly anything that you've seen. Now, obviously, it's not going to beat the likes of, Battle for the Wall and stuff like that. It's not there yet, or the Ballad of the Bastard. It's not quite there yet. It's very close, and I do mean very, very close, because this was 10 minutes. It's all we got of this, whereas those episodes are full entire episodes. So when we get a full entire episode of shit like this going down, then it's going to surpass Game of Thrones, and it's so close to doing it right now. I think the showrunners of this one compared to Dan Wise and Dan. I can't remember their fucking name.
DB Wise and Dan Benioff.
There you go. It's they're best being forgotten anyway. The douchebags.
No.
Forget them. There's a reason they got sacked from Star Wars, and the reason they got sacked from fucking Netflix and that, because they're shit.
They're not shit. They gave us one of our favorite shows of all time.
90% of that was George R.R. Martin.
No, it wasn't. The best episode of Game of Thrones was The Winds of Winter, and that was after the books ended. The best episode is fully. I'm a DB. I'm a Benioff and Weiss truther, but no, I get you, and we are we're going off in tangents here. We could probably have a whole debate on that, and I want it. So let's make time for that at some stage. Yeah. But I totally agree with what you're saying, even if I don't agree with your slander of Benioff and Weiss. What I find really interesting about this series is, and maybe this is a bit of lingering kind of doubt and hurt from the way Game of Thrones ended. And maybe part of it is because season 1 was very jolting at times. Now, I loved it personally, and I got it, but and I knew that season 2 was going to settle down to be more day to day, and we're seeing that it is. But I think people have been a little butthurt with the likes, and I don't say that in a pejorative way, but they've been a little burned by these stories that they're not rushing out of their way. This isn't dominating conversation. There's a lot of people I know are watching this, and you'd expect that with kind of the fan base that Game of Thrones brought. But there's a lot of people I know, even like I said, within the Dragon Boys of Summer, there's people who are like, I haven't caught up on House of the Dragon. I'm up to date on The Boys, I'm up to date on The Bear, I'm up to date on this, but I haven't caught up on House of the Dragon. And there's no urgency. And we're in the group chat being like, watch it, trust me, fucking watch it. It's amazing. And that's the message I have. And again, I don't know why there's probably no one now listening who hasn't watched this episode. And if you have, well, now you know what happens. But like, you need to watch this show if you ever liked Game of Thrones. Like you
Yeah,
said, I agree. It hasn't got the tenure of Game of Thrones. It hasn't got series after series after series. And again, Game of Thrones, 6 near perfect series, 2 that again just weren't up to scratch. There's a few really bad episodes in there, but they really what Game of Thrones did was 25% of it just wasn't as good as the amazing first 75% of it. Um, but again, like this is up there, and I totally agree with what you're saying. As good as almost any episode of Game of Thrones. Like if we are ranking Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon top 10 episodes, this is in there. Like it
yeah.
is fantastic. Alan Taylor is someone that everyone gets excited about when we see he's directing an episode, and it's for a reason. But it's not just because he does the big set pieces. It's how he does the little things as well. Like again, like you kind of hinted at, like a big Game of Thrones or House of the Dragon episode is coming up. There's just something about it because they take time to get into the little things. Do you
Hmm.
remember like what was it, the oh my God, I forget it. Where we saw kind of the first real White Walker attack when they attacked the um what was it called again? But the first real White
Ha-
Walker attack. Come at
no,
me,
Hard
Sam.
Home. Hard
Hard
Home.
Home, that's the one. But there's half the episode of that, if you watch it, is just chilled. And then it ends on Sam being like, don't worry about John. He always comes back. And you're like, oh shit, something big's about to happen. And they just have a way of setting up the first half of the episode. And that's what this was. It was very slow. It was very
Mhm.
character based. They were taking their time, but they were doing so confidently and setting a scene. And then as they kind of transition into the big fuck off scene that they know everyone's going to talk about, even then you have like big character moments. Like while they're kind of setting the scene visually for us, you have in the background Rhaenyra telling Jace about the Song of Ice and Fire, and you're just like, big shit is happening. It's all coming in. And then there's executing it and making all of that tension and groundwork pay off. And that's something that Alan Taylor just has the bona fides there. But I want to give time to discuss the execution of it all because for the first time we saw, and again, I'm going to go out and say this was the best use of dragons in Game of Thrones or House of the Dragon by far. Like it's not, and I know you're comparing it to like to moments within Game of Thrones. I'll give you like again, okay. You mentioned the loot train attack, where Danny kind of laid waste to the Lannister army and Jamie nearly died, and um, that was the start of this battle. You know what I mean? The reason that worked for us is because we'd had 7 seasons of build up at that stage, and we'd never actually seen it full fledged dragon action, and we got a taste of it, and it was instantly vicious and instantly it lived up to the billing. That was the start of this fight, okay? That was the moment when Rhaenys came in and started just laying waste to people, just killing thousands at a time with melees. Then it escalated again. Then there was a twist, and then it escalated again, and then there was a devastating payoff. What were your thoughts? Because obviously you're coming into this knowing what the scene is as a book
Mhm.
reader and knowing what's coming up. So you've certain visual expectations in your head. I haven't read that far ahead. I've only
Yeah.
read up to the cutoff in season 2. So I didn't know this was coming at all. But did this live up to your, and I just want to give time to kind of talk through the dragon battle and seeing it because it's different to reading it on the page.
Yeah. It lived up to it and then some. Um, we knew there was something. If you had never read the books, you knew something was going on because of these cryptic little things between Kristen Cole and Aemond. Um, and then when you see the smile on Kristen Cole's face, and you're like, oh yeah, I just hate to see the fucker happy. I really do.
Hmm.
I just do not like him at all. Like he's a great character, and the fucking
Yeah,
acting is fantastic.
it's
But
great.
he's such a likable hatred
Yeah,
prick.
love to hate.
You know what I mean. You love to hate him. But this battle for me, I read about the Battle of Rook's Rest, and it doesn't go into that much detail in the books. It does obviously go into a bit, but it's not too much. But when you actually visually see it, it absolutely portrays Rhaenys as the most badass of any dragon rider out there. I don't. Eamon might have the biggest dragon, but he only wins because he's the biggest dragon, not because he's a great rider and because he has the biggest fucking dragon. Rhaenys was literally the queen. She was the queen of this. She was absolutely fantastic. Her dragon, we'd only ever seen once before in the kind of close up that you'd seen when she escapes from beneath the floorboard. Yeah, beast under the boards. And that was fantastic. So to actually see her in flight and to see attacking the army, that was great. So obviously she thinks that it's just her and Aegon, and she's gone, have this fucker matched. He's out here, and she very much did. She was commanding in the scene. She was fantastic in how she flew Meleys. Meleys kind of knew exactly what she wanted her to do. All Aegon says, Dracarys. I'm like, that's not going to cut it, buddy. That's not going to cut it. And the reason it's not going to cut it because Meleys go straight into him. And I mean, the talons go straight into Sunfire's belly. And you're like, oh, jeez. Oh, my God. Oh, Aegon's fucked. And then the big boy comes in. You're like, oh, Jesus. Yeah. What I didn't expect was when Aemond says Dracarys, I was not expecting that because he then literally tries to incinerate both of them, and that I was not expecting. So these are the little curves that the show is putting into the source material. That's very, very good. I mean, I loved that. Absolutely loved that because you really had no idea. Like, what the fuck just happened? When Rhaenys says, I think, attack Meleys, but you could see it on her face. She was resigned, like, I can't win this.
You know,
I can't win. But you know what? We're fucking going to do it anyway. So when the two of them actually come together and they're fighting, fucking brilliant, just dragon fire and biting and clawing the whole lot. Now she's holding her own, she's still there.
She won round one.
Yeah, when they fell to the ground and Criston Cole got knocked out, I was like, haha, fuck you, prick. When they hit the ground and when rolling through the army, she rises up quicker than Vhagar. I'm like, okay, go on, please, go on. I know what happens. Go on. And then she was like, right, let's go. Attack again. But Vhagar is nowhere to be found. I'm like, this is just going to be the repeat of what happened to Luke. And it pretty much was. Now, obviously, Meleys is much bigger, but my God, just before the attack, Meleys looks back at her, and Meleys even knows it's like we're fucked here, like we're fucked. So as soon as Vhagar rises up from the castle or the back of the castle and just clamps onto the neck, you're like, that was it. And what I found very interesting, very, very beautifully done, Meleys, you see the life drain from her on her eyes, her eye color changes, and it goes a white. And Vhagar just like, I'm done. Literally opens his jaws and flies away. And then the fall, and like, and iconic. Like not only that, like literally she falls, destroys the outer wall, and then that allows the army to then invade the castle. Anything that has happened in not Game of Thrones, House of Dragons so far was eclipsed by this.
Yeah,
absolutely stunning visually. Emotionally, you had a tear in your eye because not only you weren't only losing one character, you were losing two and possibly four. When you look at it this way, you're looking at two dragons, one definitely dead, and Rhaenys is dead. She's not going to survive.
She blew up.
The other two, you could hear Sunfire breathing. So at the end of the day, Sunfire is still alive. Clearly very badly, very, very badly wounded. And a lot of that wasn't even Rhaenys. It was actually fucking Vhagar. And you're like, what was Aemond doing? What was he doing? Clearly he has ambitions. Very, very clearly he has ambitions.
He said it. He said it out straight in season one. Like if they ever look for me to be king, I intend to be found.
Yeah. So very, very interesting to say the least. It's going to be interesting to see where they go from here. Now, if they are following the books, I know exactly what happens. But very, very well done. Yeah. Just sets it up so well. It's like They have now, if we're looking at the actual dragons that have riders, they've lost their biggest.
Oh, we have time. We're gonna strategize.
Yeah.
Don't you
Yeah.
worry. We're gonna strategize greed versus. We're gonna move it around the map. We're gonna do our
Yeah.
own Subbuteo game, because apparently that works. But I do want to take time before we go on to kind of the speculation and so on to kind of just revel in the little details that made this such a masterful scene because it's not just throwing millions of CGI at it. It is so much more. The attention to detail here was phenomenal. How they captured it. Again, you got to consider that how long is going into this battle. Like we saw in Game of Thrones season one, we saw like we had the concept of dragons was introduced to us. That's 2011. So there's 13 years of our lives we've waited to get this because we never really got dragon battles. We got like fire versus ice dragons, but even at that stage, it didn't feel that real. It didn't feel kind of as satisfying as they could make it. We're getting dragons in their prime, the biggest and baddest of all time, the goats. You know what I mean? This is the Ric Flair versus Hulk Hogan of dragon battles. And it was amazing. But I love the details that went into it, like the soldier turning to ash as soon as Kristen put his hand on his shoulder. Beautiful. Little things that they've thought of that we didn't even think of that just are so visceral and disgusting, but real and really hammer home the scope of this. Like the dragon's blood burning people like acid, because of course a dragon has hot blood, but you don't think of dragons bleeding over people like the when they hit the ground, Vhagar just stepping on people and incinerating them. They are ex people. Like we see the people running, and then like one footstep of his, and they're gone. As the dragons fall, they explode like an atomic bomb. Like the visual of them, because I think again, you think of dragons, but they made it into like again, we're talking about the Dance of the Dragons here, and it was like a dance. It was beautiful and terrifying to watch at the same time. You think of dragons battling and you think of kind of two dragons breathing fire at each other. But of course, fire isn't going to hurt a dragon. They're made of it, you know? So they have to rip, they have to claw, they have to bite, they have to scrap, they have to get it in close to them and actually just like fucking like a boxer almost. But the devastation that creatures of this size and strength can cause. But also as well how perilous a dragon battle is for a dragon rider if someone just whispers Dracarys at one stage, like, you know? Um, and then you've got almost the horror style elements that came to this. There was so much. There's horror in this when it came to Vhagar. Like, you've got the wings flying through the forest, and just like we know Vhagar because they've done so well to build them up that we know as soon as we see the holes in the wings, but also they're so giant. We're like, that's Vhagar. Now, I had done the dragon math in my head and kind of knew what was coming. As soon as Rhaenys came out and said, like, when Rhaenyra was putting herself forward, I'm like, well, Rhaenyra's not dying in this episode. But when Rhaenys is like, you have to send me, and we'd already seen Kristen be like, yeah, I know it's today. Yeah, I know they're going to come out. And they'd experienced last week that when they do poke their head out, a dragon usually follows. So they're comfortable with that. And I'm like, yeah, they've got Vhagar. So I did the math and I kind of knew, right, Rhaenys is fucked. So as soon as Vhagar comes in, you're just like, this is it. Oh my God. But like then kind of the excitement of Meleys won round one. Like Rhaenys won. That was it. You know, when they battled 50-50, she stood up. It was like Francis Ngannou and Tyson Fury. There's no reason this should happen, but I think that dragon's winning. and Vhagar had to take a beat. And then when Vhagar won, it was because they had to hide and they sabotaged. And then there's that, like it went from that horror jump scare type to having this beautiful, poignant, and instantly iconic moment of like again, you kind of mentioned the look that Meleys gave to Rhaenys as they both knew as the life drained from them and you could hear the breath stop. but they'd also set that up so perfectly earlier by having that beautiful, tender, sweet moment of Rhaenys kind of looking and having that bonding moment with Meleys. Like, here we go, off the battle again. You know what I mean? And every time, as you see now we know the scale of dragon battles. Now we've experienced it and seen it, and it's different then. But Rhaenys has been in a share of dragon battles. She gets it. So she knows that when she's saying off the battle we go again, it's very real that this is probably the last time. Um, and that just all built up and calculated to watching her fall. And that look that I will never forget. And you watch it, and as soon as you see it, you're just like, fuck. And with that, we have to say a big rest in peace to Rhaenys Valerian, the queen who never was, but she didn't need a crown. She was an absolute queen and an absolute boss of this series, and a huge loss. So I want to take some time to pay tribute to her as a character, but also Eve Best, the actress who plays her as she departs the show. And in case there's any ambiguity, she's dead. They're very open about this. Eve Best is like, I've left the show. I'm dead. Now, we saw it with Damon's kind of visions at Harrenhal. Maybe we'll see a cameo of her again, but this is it for the character. I just want to give you a moment to kind of reflect on Rhaenys and, her death and the contribution to the show that she made.
Certainly one of the better characters in the show. And she was just badass from the start. Just absolutely badass from the very beginning, from the very first episode of season 1, that she was chosen. She wasn't chosen, and Viserys was, and to go from that to, is she going to be an ally to Rhaenyra? Is she going to go against Rhaenyra? And then she doesn't. And then that fantastic scene where Aegon gets crowned, and all of a sudden she comes up and is like, "Hey, are you going to kill him? What? Kill the little fucker. Kill them all. Kill them all." Oh, you just flew away. You dozy bollocks. You could have ended the war before it even started. Bang, face palm moment to this. And I will say one thing. When you look at the scenes between Rhaenys and Corlys, they're done so well. Like, you genuinely believe that these two people are an actual couple.
Yeah.
To the point where even when they're doing interviews about the show, it's like, is there something going on here? Are they actually a couple? What the fuck? Like, this is like, they're obviously really, really close. They're really, really good friends. But obviously the chemistry between them was fantastic. They were fantastic. They were brilliant. I love the fact as well that she acknowledges that she knows that Corlys has a bastard, or possibly multiple bastards. We don't really know. The fact that this Alan character has now come into it as well, which does, no spoilers to me. He does stick around. That's all I'm going to say. Fantastic. And when she says those words, and you touched on it as well, when she said those words, "You have to send me," you knew that was the end of it. That was it. She was never going to send Luke, not Luke, Jace.
Yeah.
She was never going to go herself, even though she was going to send. "Oh no, I'll go." I was like, "You're a puny little dragon? I don't fucking think so." At the end of the day, Jace and her dragons. Okay, they have dragons, but they're really small. They really are. Even Rhaenys' granddaughter, what's her name? Baela. Even Baela's is only small. So yes, when Daemon says in season 1, we have this dragon, that dragon, this dragon, that dragon. Yeah, but they're all tiny. Literally, Vhagar eats bigger dinners. So they're all small dragons. So this was one of the bigger dragons. So this was a huge loss, not only the show, to have these characters gone, because Meleys is a character in her own right, but to have it go the way it did was fantastic. But it's a huge loss to the show, to the story. She will definitely be missed. One of my favorite characters since kind of the original Game of Thrones. But you know what? If there was one way to go out, that was the way to go.
Yeah. It's a huge loss is exactly what I have written down, what I wrote down in my notes as I was watching. It really, really is. And it's got that Game of Thrones type of way where how many times in Game of Thrones we're like, how can the show go on without this person? Like, you've got Tywin, you've got Joffrey, you've got, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Pedro Pascal's character, I can't remember off the top of my head now, but like, again, we were just getting to know him and he was so cool. And you're like, there's so many of these deaths that we're like, how can the show goes on? And look, when they've given us an episode this good. I'm not going to worry about the show. But that says a lot for her. And the performances of her and Paddy Constantine were so crucial. And I'm also going to add Minnie Alcock to that, and Risa fans as well. These are the performers who, and again, sorry, of course, how can I be remiss and not kind of bring up Matt Smith too as well? But these are the core performers that actually told us, no, 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 don't worry about the fact that Game of Thrones ended bad. We've got this. And it's like they brought credibility to this. Eve Best, the on-screen presence that she commanded was, you respected her. You saw she was wise in a way that you instantly understood that she should have been queen, and we're not watching this story if she was. We're living in a better world, but that's not unfortunately the world that we've got. And then you consider a performance in this episode. And again, I'd really encourage people, if they haven't already, to watch the 20-minute kind of mini documentary they made of the making of. It's on the HBO YouTube channel. Brilliant. Because again, you got to consider that most of this and everything we see in Dragons, it's on blue screen. And it's essentially she's riding like a buck and bronco, you know? But what she did was like even just the line delivery of attack Melees and turning back around, like she could telegraph that in such a subtle way that you knew you needed to sit up and pay attention, because she probably was steering towards a heroic death, but she was so boss and so self-assured and so brave and so unflinching at what she had to know was her most likely death. But she was going down swinging, and she was so confident and commanding that she put that seed of doubt into your brain that you're like, maybe Melees can do it. Maybe Ngannou can beat Fury here. Like, what's going on? And again, just beat the shit out of that insolent Aemond. But Aemond is too good of a heel, and there's too many little plot strands that realistically, when you did the math, you knew that was going to happen. But it doesn't matter if shows are predictable and they go the way we think we're going to go. It's like a good wrestling match. It's just like, make us doubt it for even a second, even if I know which is going to result. Make me go 1, 2, oh my god, and make me believe for a second. And she did, and that was the strength of her performance. Yeah, like you said, I the same note as you did. Like the her and Alan is like a nice version of Cat and Jon Snow. And I'm really upset that we won't get to explore more of her and Corliss's relationship, and also their sex life too. Like, she seems like really modern. We learned last week she's a bit of a dom in the bedroom, and now she's also pretty chill with an open marriage situation. She's like, do what you want, but don't lie to me. You know what I mean? And it's like, I don't think you can lie to me as well. Um, and again, like, I'm not worried about this show. They've just given us the best episode they've ever given us, and it seems to be in a really good place. But you cannot have a performance this good and not have lost something with it. You know what I mean? When a character dies, Eve Best, shout out. She is, whatever word we're going to call this, a Song of Ice and Fire kind of universe, Hall of Famer. Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon. She is a Hall of Famer, absolute
100%.
boss. And Rhaenys, great character, and a great performance. And yeah, just an iconic death. And a death that was big enough and it felt important enough that she deserved that kind of to go out that way. But devastating both for the character to go and to lose a performer of that stature. So let's do the lay of the land. Let's do the tell of the tape, because there's a lot of debate already. The bit that I have had a chance in the day since I've watched it, there's a lot of debate already about who won this battle, and I'm like, the Greens won, clearly. Like, again, I know, okay, on paper it's not great. The king was seen like basically exploding with his dragon, having like came in third in a 3-horse race in a triple threat match. He was the clear third. If this was a triple threat wrestling match, Aegon was the wrestler that the two real wrestlers were fighting, and then every now and then he ran into the ring and they just threw him out there. Not a great look for the king.
Yeah.
I get the optics of it, but for me, I look at this and I get that, like, people will talk and that Aegon potentially being dead or at least seriously wounded or incapacitated. He's not coming back. He's not going to be at the small council meeting next week. Whatever the case is. But Vhagar, man, you're not beating him. No one's beating him. He beat your best. Like, who won the Battle of Rook's Rest? Tell me how you see the lay of the land after this. Obviously, I know you know what happens, but just from watching it this week, what's your takeaway and who can come out of this with the biggest win? And obviously, the Greens did. They achieved what they needed to do. They took the castle, so they won that side of it as well. But then also they have the Aegon situation and the potential civil war within that family, while another civil war is going on the outside. So that's not great either. So how are you seeing the lay of the land?
I have to be very careful with what I say here because I don't want to inadvertently give a spoiler or give spoilers at all. When I look at this, it is a clear win for the Greens. It's a clear win, no matter what you might say, might think. Yes, Aegon could be dead, could be alive. Certainly his dragon is fucked, whether the dragon is alive or not. We heard the dragon breathing, but clearly the dragon is fucked. But it's still a very, very clear win for the Greens. For the simple fact is, this wasn't about Rook's Rest at all. This was about laying the trap, which is exactly what they wanted. It's exactly what they knew a dragon was going to turn up. They didn't know who it was going to be, but knew a dragon was going to turn up. So, if a dragon's going to turn up, you might as well have, your biggest asset there ready to go. And the fact that they hid Vhagar in the fucking forest, Meleys flew over the fucking thing and she didn't even see it was there. So this is very clear. Okay, they may have lost a couple of hundred or maybe 1,000 or two of their troops. It was a small price to pay, because at the end of the day, their armies are bigger anyway. So if you take the dragon equation out of it, they've got bigger armies, so they clearly have an advantage here.
They also didn't lose their troops. They lost the troops they'd accumulated from the people who had defected over to them or risked their head. So they lost other people's troops. So, again, that's their army's probably the exact same size because they just lost whatever they gained. And they knew they were going to do that. That was collateral damage. So it's part of the plan. So,
now, either way, they took Rook's Rest. So that effectively cuts off Rhaenyra and whatever possible army she could have. Yes, they have Harrenhal. Who cares? They don't have an army. They might have an army when the Blackwood... Is it the Blackwoods? It is the Blackwoods, isn't it? When the Blackwoods actually decide to give their troops in. It's going to be very interesting to see where things go from here. But it is a very clear win for the Greens because, number one, they took out the biggest dragon that has a rider, and that you have to take that into account. The biggest dragon that has a rider for the Blacks, because Meleys is bigger than... What's Daemon's dragon? Caraxes. Even though, Caraxes is battle hardened and a big dragon, Meleys was bigger. When you take them into terms of size comparison, Drogon is slightly bigger than Meleys, so that makes him bigger than every other one that has a rider apart from Vhagar. Sunfire was smaller than Meleys and clearly had never been in a fight before because got its ass. I don't know if it's a male or female dragon, doesn't matter. Got its ass handed to them.
Wait. We need to pause there. I'm not too good at my dragon biology, but if it was a male or a female dragon, would that make a difference in having an ass? I'm just interested when you said the word got its ass handed to you. You're like, wait, is it a male or a female? What do you know about this? What is the state of dragon ass play going on here?
We could talk about that off air. That's no problem. But clearly, you see, this is the thing, right? A lot of these dragons have never been in a fight. So Meleys clearly had. Vhagar is around over 100 years, has fought during the conquest, so very battle hardened. Caraxes, again, not a battle hardened dragon. The rest of them, no, they're all babies compared to them. Now, there was the other dragons that were mentioned by Daemon in the last episode of the first season. You have Vermithor, which is a huge fucking dragon, and I do mean big. Bigger than Meleys, bigger than Caraxes, and only a little bit smaller than Vhagar. So if you were to potentially put someone on the back of him, there is the one that could possibly challenge Vhagar in terms of dragons, but does not have a rider. You've got all the other dragons as well that don't have riders. You've got Laenor's dragon that we saw, I think was last episode, flying around, and she's like, I don't know why he's like this. He just something seems to be happening with him. I have my theory on that. Again, this is not a book thing. This is
Okay.
simply something else. I have a theory that the reason that Laenor's dragon is starting to go not mental but like very very restless is that Laenor is actually now dead
Mm.
because they know when your dragon knows when you're in pain, your dragon knows when you die. So now he is officially riderless. So there
Mm.
you go. So there's another dragon, and there is the other dragons that are on the Dragon Mount. There are other dragons around as well. Um, there. You think this episode was good, and you think this dragon battle was good. You ain't seen fucking nothing yet.
Okay.
And
Okay.
that's as far as I can go with that
Okay.
without spoilers. You
Okay.
ain't seen nothing yet. To me, this as fantastic as this was and as big as it was, this was small compared to what's coming.
Okay, amazing. You're
No
setting
more.
me, you're
No
getting me
more.
excited. I can freely speculate because again, I don't know
Yes.
what's coming up. Okay, so I want to, and I want to share some thoughts. And again, you might sit here and kind of snigger at me, and because obviously I don't know, and any book readers listening may feel the same. Okay, but this to me, watching this is how I felt. As thrilling as this week was, seeing him in action, Vhagar looked so unstoppable this week that I can't dragon mat any scenario where the Blacks just don't walk this at this stage. They are heavy favorites, and that's why this is a clear win for them. Again, the only thing that's a bad thing for the Blacks here or for the Greens here, um, is that the king fell. But we all know the king's a bit of a lame duck anyway. And actually, if Aemond was to take over as king and he would be next in line, they probably would be stronger from a battle standpoint as well. So again, like actually, Aegon dying isn't the worst thing for the Greens. It does harm their claim, at kind of a peak time, and that's tough. But now we've gone beyond semantics. This is about power. It's about might. It's about who can win the war that's happening. So we also saw as well, interestingly, how ineffective armies are when the dragons come to play. So this is all going to be won on dragons. And again, Melee's the biggest dragon now is off the board, and they don't look to have anyone who can even lay a glove on Vhagar, particularly, you know, Daemon's not in the best state in Harrenhal, you know what I mean? So Caraxes is tied up with that as well. And I imagine, like, I think that's where the season's going. I think probably we know that there's another battle coming up. And again, it seems to be pointing in one very clear direction. What the Blacks need is a Dragon X Machina moment. And yeah, you're talking about Vermithor there. You're talking about King Jaehaerys. He's, for anyone who doesn't know, Vermithor was the old King Jaehaerys. If you don't know who that is the king we see at the Grand Coronation at the very start of House of the Dragon. That is his dragon. So this is an old dragon. It's a battle-tested dragon because while Jaehaerys was known as the Conciliator and he reigned over a long reign of peace, there wasn't peace before he got there. He was the conciliator when he got on the throne. So Vermithor can go and is theirs. But it's who do you get to ride him? How do you do that? How do you build that bond? How do you make that bond stronger than Aemond's with Vhagar as well? And we've no idea what came of that after Daemon was seen chatting him up. We know Daemon survived it, which is probably good for him. But we've never followed up on that. And it was never mentioned in any of the council meetings. So even if you just had Jace randomly come along on Vermithor, then it's like that just feels a little bit random. You know what I mean? There needs to be more. So for me, Vhagar is such a difference maker that they almost need to find a way to take him off the board soon. Okay. Like in this season soon, because they have to make this believable that the Blacks even have a chance. But then my mind goes a different way, and I think back to how the Targaryens are essentially their own worst enemy at all times. And then there's that old quote that opened the series of how the Targaryens are the only people who can defeat themselves, and that's ultimately what we're seeing: Targaryen versus Targaryen violence. And even from within, like you have at the moment on the green side, there's a mini civil war. You have Aemond, Aegon, Alicent, Otto, Laris, they all seem to be reading off completely different playbooks. They're all trying to play their own games. They're not in sync whatsoever. Aemond might have been trying to kill Aegon at the end of this episode had Kristen not intervened and seen it. Everyone is on different pages. So the Greens are winning, but they can't get on the same page, and that could hinder things as well. Then there's the knowledge that we have as viewers that we're somehow only getting started. This is just the beginning of all of this. How? How did they sustain this? I don't see how there's enough characters or dragons. I can't figure out the numbers in my head. And again, I just can't see how, like, dragon battles are so devastating that, like, how does it not just come down to one big battle next where Vhagar either gets taken out, and if Vhagar is taken out, then the Greens are fucked, or like Vhagar just vaporizes all the other dragons? How does it not come down to that and the war is just instantly over? I have no idea, but I cannot fucking wait to find out. I am buzzing after this. So the last thing I want to discuss before we wrap up on this, because we do have two other shows to discuss. We will take a whistle stop to the other two. Harrenhal has Daemon slipping into madness. So I just want to touch base on what your thoughts on everything, and we'll go lightning round on this. But what are your thoughts on Daemon and Harrenhal and that whole experience? And again, we're getting a lot of cameos. We saw Millie Alcock was back as young Rhaenyra this week, and we saw Lena back as well. And we also saw Aemond appear in his visions too. So what are your thoughts on Daemon's kind of trippy experience in Harrenhal?
It's certainly interesting to see what's happening to him. You say to yourself, is he going mad? Is it the ghosts of Harrenhal doing this to him? Or is it this new character called Alice Rivers? Is she actually doing something to him? And I think that's more plausible than anything else. She's certainly an interesting character. She calls herself a barn owl in human form. I'm like, Jesus Christ, they're really sending the crazies in this fucking season. It's very interesting to see because she gives him that drink, and then all of a sudden he's in the council chamber talking to Lord Blackwood, and you're like, who are you? Oh yeah, of course, well met. You're like, fuck, I need to. What the fuck just happened to me? He seems to definitely be going a little bit cuckoo. But I think there is more plausible explanation as well as that he is actually having a ever so slight bit of PTSD. Is that he now realizes I got a child murdered. Like, this is a man who's probably killed hundreds, if not thousands, of people with his dragons and sword and whatever else. But this one child now haunts him. This one baby haunts him, and it really is starting to get to him. And you could clearly see that because the scene of Millie Alcock being back and sewing the head back on, was it the Jaceres? Not just, is it Jaceres?
Yeah, it's Young
Daenerys, or one of it's a J, whatever the fucking name is. Sewing the head back on, you're like, oh Jesus Christ! Like that scene itself, you're like, Jesus. But the look on Aemon's face when he sees the child and he sees Millie, Rhaenyra sewing back on, you're like, oh, he's fucked up. Clearly, he now regrets whatever anger he has towards Rhaenyra. He clearly regrets his part in the death of the child, because that effectively that started the war more than anything else did. Even with Luke dying, it still hadn't started because Rhaenyra was very reluctant to do anything, and then all of a sudden, this one act has really kickstarted the war now. The fact that he knows he doesn't have an army. He has nothing. He's been told by Alice Rivers that he's going to die there. And you're like, fuck, Jesus H. Christ. Like, this is just, there's a lot going on for Aemond, and there's a lot of things going through his head. He still has the idea of he could have been king type of situation as well. So there's too much running through his head. There's too many things going on. It's that PTSD. It is the guilt of the fight with Rhaenyra, and it is the loss of him being the heir to the throne. So he may be getting a little bit of that famous Targaryen madness. Now, I don't think it's going to go quite as far as that, but it's a very interesting story because it has effectively handicapped Daemon. But the simple fact is, he hasn't taken part in anything else. He's just sitting in Harrenhal while Meleys and Rhaenys goes off to fight, and he does nothing. Had he been there, had he been on Dragonstone, the two of them could have gone together, and then that would have been at least a match for Vhagar, because Sunfire could literally discount immediately because of the inexperience and then a drunken driver, I suppose. Yeah, drunk driver, um, a drunken rider. So can you imagine if Maylees and Caraxes had come on Vhagar? I think that would have been a match for Vhagar. Now you don't have that. You have other inexperienced dragons on the black side and Caraxes, but Caraxes been taken out because he's literally sitting in Harrenhal doing nothing. So it's going to be very interesting to see what they do. I think we're going to have a moment where Daemon finally, kicks out of it. He's kicking out at 2.5, 2 3/4. And he's like, no, I need to get back in this fight. And I think he's going to really get back into it then and maybe have some sort of reconciliation with Rhaenyra or something along those lines. But we need to get back into it because the Blacks' losses are mounting now, and it's not looking good at all. There was one thought I had while watching this show, especially later on. I was like, geez, this is great, the Targaryens. And then I realized by the end of Game of Thrones, the Targaryens are extinct apart from one man who's now gone beyond the wall. I'm like, that's really sad because the Targaryen dynasty was just fantastic.
Yeah.
And now they're gone. I'm like, oh, fuck. I never thought, when you're looking at Game of Thrones, you don't really get invested that much into the Targaryens. You do with the one Targaryen that we have. But now that there's lots of them, I'm really sad that they're gone by the time Game of Thrones comes around. I'm like, fuck me. Like, we better get a really good Aegon the Conquest series. I'll tell you, this better be fucking spectacular.
Yeah, they are. They're the main characters in this world. And the ironic thing is that the thing that introduced us to the world just had one of them, and we didn't really get into the history. But yeah, I think that's going to seem a lot more palatable by the end of this at this rate, if the show keeps going. I'm loving the return of weirdness and magic to these stories. We haven't got a lot of that. It's been a lot of like either big set pieces or talking in rooms, which is great, but this is also a part of Game of Thrones and this kind of experience. I you know what? Like, it's a George R. R. Martin trope to have the magical being that comes out of nowhere that is a match for one of our main characters who we previously thought as unassailable. Like, think of the witch who killed Khal Drogo. Like, think of the House of the Undying in Qarth and how that nearly proved to be Dany's undoing,
Yeah.
So this is very, very steeped in kind of the type of story that we've seen and the author behind it as well. So I'm loving it, and I'm starting to buy into it. Last week I was like, oh, I don't know. Now I'm okay with where Daemon's at. This is a reckoning for him. I think I agree with what you're saying about the PTSD, but I think it's less benevolent. I think it's more selfish. He's looking at how he lost. He's looking back on the Rhaenyra that he fell in love with, which is the young Rhaenyra. Creepy, but that's the show we're watching. But that's the Rhaenyra that he fell in love with, and he's now lost her. He's isolated himself. He is alone. He is lonely. He is getting shook down by the Blackwoods now for a little petty fight with the Bracken. Like, and he's powerless to do anything because he needs them. And it is fitting for Daemon, who's a dickhead and has been a dickhead all the time, but has managed to just get away with it because he's Daemon Targaryen. But he had Viserys and he had Rhaenyra. He had all these like powerful people propping up, and now he's burnt every last bridge and he is alone. And this is the catharsis that he needs. So either way, I'm actually okay with whatever comes of this. There could be the moment where this is the part where he has to suffer and he comes back and there's a bit of a redemption arc there. I'm open to that. I'm also very okay now after this episode with the idea of maybe this is our last season with Daemon. Maybe he might be a big death to come. Despite the fact that he's won another powerhouse of the show that kind of gave it its legs. So I'm okay with wherever this goes. I'm really intrigued by it, really intrigued by Alice Rivers. I hope we get a lot more of her because I know she's a very important character within the books. But I'm just like, how do we fit her in and how much time will we get to spend with her? Because I really want to dig into her story. But yeah, really interesting times. And look, House of Dragon firing on all cylinders, and we're delighted to see it.